I think it's pretty commonly accepted in FPV that 1S drones are some of the best options we have for ripping small spaces, like backyards, for instance. If you want to fly in your backyard, a 1S drone is a great option. But 1S drones can be really boring sometimes. They don't have a lot of power, a lot of punch, not a lot of fun, and normally that means analog video. So it's just hard to rip a 1S in your backyard and enjoy it. But what if your 1S ripping could look like this? Yeah, that seems like a lot more fun, right? Well, this build might just be for you. Hey everybody, I'm BaconNinja, and today we're going to take a look at the HD version of my PorkChop build. The PorkChop is a build that I came up with based on Bob Rugi's toothpick design. That is more of a freestyle take on a 1S 3-inch drone. But this particular PorkChop has HD video on board. Now, how do we do that in 1S? Because we all know that Caddx Vistas don't run at 1S, and even if you nakedize them and make them lightweight and put them on small drones, you can't get it to run on 1S. And most of the footage we see from 1S drones is analog, which is it's video, right? But it's not what we want to be looking at if we have options. Well, thanks to HDZero and the Whoop Lite kit, which is in this build, we now have a 1S option for HD video. And that video you saw on the DVR at the beginning is the video directly out of this quad running 1S in my backyard. I'm going to show you in a minute how I got that in here and all the considerations you need to make. But first, I'm going to cover one more time the specs of this build. I did do a video on the build when it was analog, but just for those that didn't catch it, I'm going to cover a parts list on this and everything that went into putting the PorkChop together. Let's start by talking about the frame, which is the BetaFPV HX115LR frame, which is long range. It's a long range frame design. But in this use case, I'm using it for freestyle because you can mount the battery on top. You get that freestyle feel out of this drone, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. Moving on to the motors, we are running the FPVCycle 1S 13mm motors at 11,400 kV. These things pack an awesome punch. They are great motors, and on top of them are the Gemfan 3018 bi-blade props that are recommended for these motors by FPVCycle. Getting down to the stack, we're running the DarwinFPV AIO. It's a 15 amp AIO that goes from 1 to 3S with built-in Express LRS. It is an SPI based Express LRS, but this one gives you a UFL so that you can use a full Mini Immortal T antenna rather than that little ceramic thing that I feel just pokes out too much in a build of this kind of compactness. And sitting on top of that AIO is the HDZero Whoop Lite VTX, which is a 1S capable VTX that goes from 25 to 200 milliwatts. I believe you can go from 1 to 3S on this board, so there are some options there. It is the lightest HD option available. And to go with that, in the front of the drone, we're using their Whoop Lite camera, or the Nano Lite camera by Runcam, which is an amazingly small little camera for the image quality that we're getting out of it. It is 14 millimeters by 16 millimeters tall. We'll cover why the height there makes a difference here in a minute. So now that we've covered all of the components in this build, I want to take it over to the bench and show you some considerations that had to be made to get the Whoop Lite VTX and camera into this frame. There's a couple of things that I had to do in particular to get it all to go in there and stack nicely. I didn't have to do anything when this was an analog drone because the little camera, the Caddx Ant that I had in there fit just fine, and the VTX stacked right on top of the AIO just fine. There was plenty of room, but that is not the case when going HD. So I'm going to head over to the bench and show you some things that you're going to have to do to your frame if you want to build this and get it all to squish in there just right. All right, so getting a little better view of the PorkChop here, you can see the HDZero Whoop Lite VTX sitting on top of my AIO. Well, for starters, the gummies that come with the Whoop Lite kit are just a little bit too big. So the stock gummies for the Darwin, I actually had to trim about 2 millimeters off the top there just so I can get it to sit down enough into the stack to get my nuts on the top. And right on the top of these nuts, it's a little tip, pro tip. If you use something called Shoe Goo or E6000 or Welder, a lot of people use different brands. It's a glue that doesn't quite dry. It stays soft and pliable, but I put it right over the top of the nut. And that means it'll never back out. It's impossible for it to back out. That's a nice little tip. And then when you want to take it off, you just get a pair of tweezers and you pull that off there, and you can undo it like you always would. So you don't have to worry about your stack screws or your stack backing out and getting loose. But yeah, first tip, I had to cut about 2 millimeters off of that gummy there in order to get this to sit down properly. And also to get this to sit down properly, I had to make a little recess for the USB. You see the USB plug in there? It rubs right up against the frame. And in the frame with no modifications, that plug actually does not come down anywhere near far enough to get the board all the way down so we could put the VTX on top. So what I did is I took a diamond bit in a Dremel, and I just dremeled out a little bit of extra relief here right around the USB so that we could get it all the way down. That was a really important step. Don't skip that one if you're going to do this. The next thing is going to be the camera mount here. And you can see there are 2 sets of holes where I have the Whoop Lite camera installed. That is because the original holes in the original mount for the analog camera are too large and too far back. So I had to actually take a small M2 or a 1.5 millimeter, I believe, Allen bit, and I heated it up with a torch, and I just pressed a new hole in this TPU that is perfect for the little screws that come with the Whoop Lite. I did that on both sides, obviously. I tried to get it as even as possible. It worked out really well. Also on these same prints, I had to take about 2 millimeters off the top because of the way the Whoop Lite camera sits. It is 16 millimeters tall and 14 wide, which means that it is too tall to fit in this frame. So I had to extend the frame a little bit. You see these little nuts here, that's what that's for. They're actually just spacers between the standoff and the top plate. They're M2 nuts, not the 9-lock variety, just standard M2 nuts. And they work as perfect little spacers to get you enough room to get this camera in without overextending it or adding a ton of weight. But I did have to take a couple of millimeters of TPU off the top of these camera mounts in order to clear that without coming over where the nut is placed. Other than that, I didn't have to do any modifications that were too insane to get the Whoop Lite in there. But if you're going to get the Whoop Lite in your PorkChop build, that is the way you're going to have to do it, because it will not fit in the HX115 LR frame natively. But yeah, there you go. And obviously the rest of the build, you can see the Darwin AIO under there, like we discussed earlier. And I am using a stock antenna from HDZero that actually came with one of my Freestyle VTXs, but use your antenna of choice. And underneath that, it never hurts to keep this stuff around. Another pro tip, underneath that is some nitro tubing, which is used for fuel in nitro RC cars. It makes perfect homemade gummies. So it fits around an M2 or M3 standoff or nut, and yeah, you just cut it to size and it makes a nice little squishy gummy. I actually use this in my 5-inch stacks quite a bit, so there you go. And if you're wondering how I got the Immortal T on there, what I actually did was I ran it under, around, and back, and then I zip tied it here at the bottom. So it can't go anywhere because it's up against the arms. And then I put a little bit of zip tie on it, and I did some heat shrink. So that's how you can keep this from getting banged up. It's pretty stiff and sturdy now, and it can't really go anywhere because of the arms. So that's how you get your antenna on there if you're going to build this yourself. And I really hope you do, because it is a heck of a fun quad to fly. And speaking of fun to fly, this quad, seriously, is super fun to fly. One other thing that I have changed on V2 that makes it even more fun to fly is you can run 1S packs, but you can also run 2S packs on this. Now I'm using an RDQ 550 milliamp hour non-HV 1S pack that snaps on here really nice. But I also have some Tattu 450 milliamp hour 2S HV packs that I run on here when I want a little more oomph. And I have tuned this already for 1 and 2S. If you plug a 1S pack in, it gets the PIDs for 1S. If you plug a 2S, it gets the PIDs for 2S. They are slightly different. I'm running I think it's a 65% motor output limit on 2S, so you don't burn out your 1S rated motors, but you get the 15% more punch out of the 2S, which is is pretty nice. So I will also, in the description, along with a list of parts, a complete build list of parts and where you can get them, I will put a CLI dump for the PorkChop. Now I'm running Betaflight 431 on this currently, so you can just dump that CLI right into 431 and you'll have the same tune as me, and you can maybe try out my rates if you want to. It's a nice little thing, save you a little bit of time. You won't have to tune it yourself if you're going to build this exact build. A little disclaimer on that: if you're not building this build exactly, the tune may or may not work for you. Use it at your own risk. It is very easy with a quad this light with this much thrust to weight ratio to get flyaways, so be very careful with your tuning if you're not going to run the exact same motors and props and general size of components in this build. If you're going to change some stuff up and you think it might wind up weighing a little bit more, this is right around 70 grams, then the tune might not work for you. So use it at your own risk, but it is down in the video description below, the CLI dump, if you want to build it and try it out. But yeah, now that we talked about it, I'm going to go fly it. It rips pretty hard for a 1S, right? Those packs were run on 1S. It blows my mind how well this thing flies on 1S. Bob Rugi really knew what he was doing when he designed the Baby Tooth around a very similar build. This is a bit heavier than the Baby Tooth, but man, it really can get it for some freestyle. But let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see a manufacturer maybe turn this into a bind and fly that you could just pick up off the shelf. Let me know also if you're thinking about building one. I wouldn't be above building one for you. If you maybe want to talk about that, let me know. My contact info is on my channel page. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe while you're there. And if this video was fun to watch, give it a thumbs up. But yeah, my email is on there if you want to hit me up. Maybe we'll talk about it. I'm not above building them. Of course, parts availability is a little bit rough considering FPVCycle and HDZero components are in this thing. So it's all, I'm at the mercy of manufacturers there. But maybe if we get enough interest, I could talk to a manufacturer and see what they might be willing to do with this. I know that on Facebook it's gotten quite a bit already, so add to that. But yeah, thank you very much for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you haven't yet, please feel free to subscribe. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and until next time, I'll catch you later.